started with a deal. They always do. I had spent 40 years building something steady, nothing flashy, nothing reckless. Just discipline, patience, brick by brick. I wasn't rich, but I was solid. The kind of man people trusted. The kind of man who didn't fall. Until I did. The proposal came through Mark, my son-in-law. Smooth voice, clean smile, always too clean. The kind of man who never raised his tone because he never needed to. Control doesn't shout. It waits. He framed it like an opportunity. Expansion. Partnership. Said the numbers made sense. Said he'd walk me through it. Like I needed guiding. That should have been the first warning. Not the numbers. The tone. But I ignored it. Because I was tired. Because I was older than I admitted to anyone, including myself. And because there comes a moment in a man's life when he looks at everything he's built and asks a dangerous question. Is this all there is? That question is where men like me become vulnerable. That's where men like Mark step in. I signed. The losses didn't come like a storm. They came like rot. Slow, patient, invisible at first. A delay in returns. Payment that didn't arrive. A partner who needed more time. Always just enough explanation to quiet doubt. Never enough to satisfy it. I sat at my desk late into the night, spreadsheets glowing in the dark, numbers shifting in ways they never had before. I had built my life on understanding patterns, risk, flow, timing. Now nothing aligned. Every calculation felt like it was missing something, or hiding something. Each time I brought it to Mark, he didn't get defensive. He smiled. That same controlled, measured smile. Daniel, he'd say, leaning back like the situation bored him. This is how growth works. It stretches before it stabilizes. Stretches. That word should have bothered me more. Because what he meant was simple. Something was breaking, and he expected me to accept it as progress. The house changed before I admitted I had. Homes don't collapse all at once. They shift. Subtly. A conversation ends quicker than it used to. A glance lingers a second too long. A question carries doubt instead of trust. Emily was the first shift. My daughter. She used to look at me like I was certainty itself. Like no matter what happened outside those walls, I was the fixed point. That look disappeared. Not dramatically. Quietly. Replaced with something else. Assessment. Distance. Doubt. She started asking questions that weren't really questions. Did you go over the documents carefully? Why would you risk that much at your age? Mark said this kind of move is unstable right now. Mark said. It became a rhythm. Pattern. A replacement. I wasn't the source anymore. I was the subject. Then Mark stopped pretending. It didn't happen in one moment. It unfolded. First, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence. Let me clarify what Daniel means. Then he'd start correcting me. No, that's not exactly how it works anymore. Then he'd take over entirely. I'll handle this. And the worst part? People listened to him. Even in my own home. Even at my own table. I watched conversations shift away from me, around me, past me. Like I was still physically there, but functionally obsolete. The accounts came next. There's always a moment where control changes hands. Sometimes it's loud. Mine was quiet. I think it's better if I manage things for now, Mark said one evening, scrolling through numbers on his tablet like he already owned them. Just until everything stabilizes. I looked at Emily, not him, her, because if she had said no, it would have ended there. Didn't. She nodded. No hesitation. No defense. No glance in my direction. Just agreement. That was the moment I understood something I didn't want to name. I wasn't being helped. I was being replaced. After that, the structure of my life began dissolving faster. Passwords changed. Access restricted. Just temporary, Mark would say. Until we clean this up. But nothing was being cleaned. It was being transferred. Piece by piece. Decision by decision. Authority by authority. I remember the night it became undeniable. We were sitting at the table. Dinner untouched in front of me. The air thick with something no one wanted to acknowledge. I asked the question I had been avoiding. How bad is it? Simple. direct, necessary. Mark didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, exchanged a glance with Emily, then looked at me like a man looking at something already concluded. And then, he laughed. Soft, short, final. "Daniel," he said, shaking his head slowly, "you're finished. Let's not pretend otherwise. Finished. Just like that. No anger. No hesitation. No respect. Just a statement." I didn't react. That surprised him. I saw it in his eyes. He expected resistance, denial, maybe even desperation. He didn't get any of it, because I wasn't hearing his words. I was watching Emily, waiting for anything. Correction, protest, a single sentence. There was none. She looked down at her plate, silent, and in that silence, everything ended. Not the deal, not the money, something worse. Recognition. After that, the humiliation stopped being subtle. Mark stopped softening his tone, stopped pretending this was temporary. He began speaking to me like I was already dependent, already diminished, already irrelevant. "You wouldn't understand the current market. This is too complex to explain right now. Just sign here. Just sign." That phrase came up more often. Papers appeared. Agreements. Adjustments. Formalities. I read them, carefully, and that's when the feeling began. Not confusion. Not fear. Something colder. Precision. Because the numbers didn't just look wrong. They looked guided. Losses placed too cleanly. Decisions aligning too conveniently. Risk directed in one direction. Mine. Always mine. That's when the thought formed. Quiet. Dangerous. Clear. This wasn't failure. It was design. But I didn't say it. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn anyone. Because there's a moment in betrayal where speaking too early destroys the truth. And I needed the truth. All of it. So I did the only thing a man can do when he realizes he's surrounded. I stepped back. I let my shoulders drop. I let my voice lose strength. I let them believe it. That I was tired. That I was overwhelmed. That I was finished. Mark relaxed. That was the tell. His tone softened, not with kindness, but with ownership. Emily stopped asking questions, because there was no one left to question. And me? I became invisible. A man sitting in his own house like a guest who overstayed. A name on documents that no longer meant anything. Presence tolerated. Not respected. But invisibility has its advantages. People stop hiding things from you. They stop seeing you as a threat. They speak freely, move carelessly, reveal patterns. And I watched. Every account, every transfer, every inconsistency. I listened to late-night calls Mark thought I couldn't hear. I noticed documents that didn't match explanations. I followed the trail he thought I was too broken to see. Because I wasn't broken. Not yet. I was being positioned. And the most dangerous thing a man can do in that position is pretend he doesn't understand it. So I stayed quiet. I let him build his version of my ending. I let my daughter believe it. I let the house adjust around the idea that I was already gone. Because sometimes, you don't stop the fall. You study it. You let it reach the bottom. So when you rise, you know exactly who pushed you. And I intended to know. Every detail. Every lie. Every hand involved. Because if this was a setup, then someone had already decided how my story ends. They were wrong. There's a specific kind of silence that follows humiliation. It doesn't echo. It settles. Heavy. Permanent. After that dinner, after Mark said I was finished, and Emily chose silence over me, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Felt like a waiting room. Like I was sitting in a place where a decision had already been made, and I just hadn't been formally removed yet. I leaned into it. That was the only move left. I stopped correcting them. Stopped asking questions. Stopped asserting anything that sounded like authority. When Mark spoke over me, I let him. When Emily deferred to him, I watched. When papers were placed in front of me, I signed. Slowly, carefully, but without protest. And that's when they made their mistake. They believed it. Mark changed first. Men like him are predictable when they think they've won. His tone shifted, not cautious anymore, not respectful even on the surface. It became casual, possessive. He started referring to things as if they already belonged to him. We'll restructure this property. I've already planned the next move. Once everything is transferred, it'll run cleaner. Transferred. He stopped saying your. He said we. But what he meant was mine. Emily followed in a different way. Not dominance. Distance. She stopped including me in anything that mattered. Conversations about finances happened without me. Decisions about assets, properties, even personal matters filtered through Mark. I became background. A chair at the table no one needed. Sometimes she would look at me like she wanted to say something, like there was still a thread there, but she never pulled it. And threads that aren't pulled, rot. The only person who didn't change was Ryan, my adopted son, not by blood, but by choice. And that distinction matters more than people admit. Ryan didn't ask questions at first. He observed. He always had that habit. Quiet, deliberate, watching patterns instead of reacting to noise. One night, he found me in my study. The same desk, the same dim light, the same papers that no longer belonged to me. He didn't sit, didn't pretend, just stood there. You're letting this happen, he said. Not accusing, not emotional, just stating it. I leaned back in my chair, looked at him for a long moment. Yes. He frowned slightly. Not confusion, calculation. That's not like you. No, I said. It isn't. Silence stretched between us. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. This isn't just a bad deal, is it? There it was. The question no one else had the instinct or courage to ask. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached for a document on my desk and slid it toward him. Numbers, transfers, timelines, small inconsistencies that didn't mean much alone. But together, pattern. Ryan scanned it, his eyes narrowing. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. He looked up at me then. Not like a son looking at a father. Like a man recognizing another man. You think he set this up? Not a question. A conclusion. I nodded once. Not just the deal, I said. The aftermath. Ryan's jaw tightened. He's bleeding you out. Yes. And Mom. He stopped himself, corrected. Emily, she doesn't see it. I shook my head. She sees what he shows her. Ryan exhaled slowly, pacing once across the room. So why are you just sitting here? That question again. Why not fight? Why not expose it? Why not stop it? Because war isn't about the first move. It's about the final one. Because he's not done, I said. Ryan stilled. I continued, my voice low, measured. Men like Mark don't stop halfway. He didn't risk this much just to damage me. He wants everything that's left. Ryan's eyes sharpened. The properties. Yes. The accounts you still control. Yes. The signatures you haven't given yet. I looked at him. Exactly. Silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was focused. So you're waiting, Ryan said slowly. Yes. For what? For him to show me the full extent of it. Ryan let out a quiet breath. Something almost like disbelief mixed with reluctant respect. That's risky. Yes. You could lose everything. I met his gaze. I already have. That was the truth. Money can be rebuilt. Assets can be regained. But the moment your own family decides you're finished, that's the real loss. Ryan nodded slowly. Then he did something no one else had done in that house since this began. He stepped forward and put his hand on my shoulder. Not to guide. Not to control. To stand with me. I'm with you, he said. Simple. Solid. Real. I studied him for a long moment. This boy, no, this man, had nothing to gain from standing beside me. In fact, he had everything to lose. Opportunities. Stability. A future that would be easier if he just stayed quiet like the others. Why? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Because you never treated me like I was optional. that hit harder than anything Mark had said. Harder than Emily's silence. Because it was truth. Unfiltered. I nodded once. Then listen carefully, I said. Ryan leaned in slightly. And for the first time since everything began, I spoke without pretending. We let him win, I said. Ryan frowned. What? We let him believe he's already won. We give him everything he expects. Compliance, silence, signatures when necessary. That sounds like losing. It looks like losing, I corrected. I slid another document across the desk. This one wasn't part of the visible mess. This one was different. Copies, records, hidden accounts. While he builds his case, I continued, we build ours. Ryan's eyes moved across the page. Faster this time. Understanding forming in real time. You've been tracking this. Yes. How long? Since the first inconsistency. He looked up again, something sharper in his expression now. You were already ahead. 2 steps, I said quietly. Ryan let out a low breath, almost a laugh. But there was no humor in it. He thinks you're finished. I nodded. He needs to, because that's the key. A predator only exposes himself fully when he believes the prey can't fight back. And when does this end? Ryan asked. I leaned back, folding my hands. When he makes his final move. Ryan's voice dropped. And what does that look like? I met his eyes. Everything. The house was quiet that night. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Before, it was suffocating. Now, it was loaded. Mark moved through the house like a man already in control. Emily followed his lead, her distance from me now complete. Decisions continued without me. Documents kept appearing. Pressure increasing. Subtle. Strategic. And I let it happen. Every step. Every push. Every assumption. Because the deeper he went, the harder the fall would be. Ryan stayed close. Watching. Learning. Quiet in the way that matters. And me? I played my role. The broken man. The finished man. The one who didn't see it coming. Because the truth is simple. The most dangerous position in any war is being underestimated. And Mark had already made that mistake. There's a moment in every setup when the man pulling the strings stops hiding his hands. Not because he's careful. Because he's certain. Certain he's already won. That moment came on a gray morning. No warning. No build-up. Just a folder placed in front of me. Mark stood across the table. Relaxed. Almost bored. Emily sat beside him. Arms folded. Eyes distant. She didn't look at me anymore. Not really. I opened the folder slowly. Property transfer documents. Final assets. The last pieces of what used to be mine. This will simplify everything, Mark said. Like he was explaining something to a client. Not dismantling a man. We consolidate ownership, eliminate risk exposure, and move forward clean. Clean. That word again. Everything he did had a way of sounding efficient. Reasonable. Necessary. I turned a page. Then another. Careful. Measured. Not reacting. Because this was it. Every remaining asset listed. Every signature line waiting. Every safeguard removed. If I signed this, there would be nothing left to take. Because everything would already be his. I looked up at him. He didn't flinch. Didn't hide it. Didn't pretend anymore. You've thought this through, I said quietly. A statement. Not a question. Mark smiled. Not the polite one. The real one. The one he had been holding back. For a long time, Emily shifted slightly beside him, but still said nothing. Not a word. That silence. It didn't hurt anymore. Confirmed. I nodded slowly, closing the folder. You'll get what you want, I said. And I meant it. Just not the way he thought. Mark leaned forward slightly satisfied. I knew you'd understand. Of course he did. Because in his mind, I already had. I picked up the pen. Held it above the paper. Paused just long enough to make it believable. Then signed. One by one. Every line. Every page. Every final piece. Mark didn't even try to hide his satisfaction now. I could see it in the way he sat back, in the way his shoulders relaxed, in the way he glanced at Emily, not for approval but for acknowledgement. It was done. Or at least, he thought it was. The room fell into a quiet that felt different. Not heavy, not tense. Final. Mark stood first. "I'll process everything today," he said. "By tomorrow, it's all transferred." He looked at me like a man offering closure. Like this was the end of something. He was right, just not in the way he expected. He left the room. Emily lingered for a moment. Then finally, she spoke. "You should have listened to him earlier," she said softly. Not angry, not emotional, just distant. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger who had chosen certainty over truth, convenience over loyalty. "I did," I said quietly. She frowned slightly. "You didn't." I stood slowly, met her eyes. I listened very carefully. She didn't understand. And that was the final confirmation. She turned and followed him out, leaving me alone in a house that was no longer mine. Or at least, that's what they believed. Ryan was waiting in the study. He had heard enough, seen enough. "It's done?" he asked. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You signed everything?" "Yes." Silence. Sharp. Tense. Then, "Tell me you didn't just hand him everything." I walked past him, closing the door behind us, locked it, turned back, and for the first time, I allowed myself to drop the act. "He just handed himself everything," I said. Ryan stared at me, processing. Then something shifted in his eyes, understanding catching up. "You wanted him to do it," he said slowly. "Yes." "Why?" "Because now he owns it." Ryan frowned. "That's what he wanted." I shook my head. "That's what exposes him." I moved to the desk, pulling out a second folder. This one thinner, but heavier. "Every transfer he made," I said, opening it. "Every redirection. Every shell account he thought was invisible. Every inconsistency we tracked." Ryan stepped closer, scanning the documents. "And now it all points to him," he murmured. "Now it all belongs to him," I corrected. That was the difference. Before, it was my loss, my failure, my responsibility. Now, it was his, entirely, legally, irrefutably. Ryan exhaled slowly. "You let him take the fall." "No," I said. "I made sure he built it himself. Because that's the truth. You don't destroy a man like Mark by stopping him. You let him go further than he should, further than he planned, further than he can recover from." Ryan looked at me, something like respect settling in. "You were ahead the whole time." I shook my head slightly. "No." A pause. Then, "I just waited until he wasn't." That night, the house felt different. Not theirs. Not mine. Something in between. Mark moved through it like a man celebrating silently. Calls made behind closed doors. Short conversations. Confident tone. Emily stayed close to him. Closer than before. As if proximity to control made her feel safe. Neither of them noticed what mattered. The emails being sent. The accounts being flagged. The records already copied and placed where they needed to be. Ryan handled his part without hesitation. Quiet. Efficient. Exact. By morning, everything was in motion. Mark walked into the house that day like a man who had finally secured his future. He didn't look at me, didn't need to, because in his mind, I was already gone. That's when the call came. He answered it casually, confident. Then his expression changed. Subtle at first, then sharper. "What do you mean flagged?" he said. A pause. "No, that's not possible." Another pause. His posture shifted, shoulders tightening, voice lowering. "I need details." I watched him from across the room, silent, still. Emily noticed it too. "What's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer her immediately, because for the first time, he didn't have control of the situation. And that's when it began. Not the fall, the realization, the moment a man understands. He didn't win. He just walked into something he didn't see. And by the time he sees it, it's already too late. I said nothing, did nothing, just watched. Because this part belonged to him. Every consequence, every exposure, every piece of truth unraveling around him. He built it. I just let him finish. Mark's face changed before the house did. That was the first sign. A man can lose money and still pretend. He can lose status and still stand straight. But when a man loses the illusion of control, something primitive shows through the skin. Fear. Not loud at first. Just a flicker behind the eyes. "What do you mean reviewed?" he said into the phone. His voice was still calm, but it had gone thin. Emily stood beside him, watching his expression collapse in pieces. I sat near the window with a cup of coffee cooling in my hand. Ryan stood behind me, silent, steady. Mark turned away from us, lowering his voice. No, those were authorized transfers." Pause. His jaw tightened. "I have documentation." Another pause. Then silence. Longer this time. The kind that does not forgive. When he ended the call, he didn't turn around immediately. He stared at the wall. A blank wall. Like answers might appear there if he hated it enough. Emily stepped closer. "Mark." He flinched. "That told me everything." "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer. So I did. "They found the pattern." His head snapped toward me. For the first time in months, he really looked at me. Not through me. At me. And what he saw unsettled him. Because the old man he thought he had buried was sitting there calmly, holding a cup of coffee, watching the dirt slide back over him instead. "What did you do?" he asked. There it was. Not confusion. Accusation. Because guilty men always believe exposure is an attack. I set the cup down. Slowly. "I listened," I said. Mark stared at me. Emily turned pale. Ryan did not move. The next hours unfolded like a house catching fire from the basement upward. Calls came first. Banks. Attorneys. A compliance officer whose name Mark repeated too many times, as if saying it could make the situation smaller. Then came emails. Frozen accounts. Pending reviews. Requests for documentation. Formal notices. Words clean enough to wear gloves. But underneath them, ruin. Mark tried to control the room. He paced. He shouted. He blamed clerks, systems, timing, bad luck. Then he blamed me. Of course he did. "You set me up," he hissed. I almost laughed. Almost. But there was nothing funny in it. "No," I said. "You set yourself up." I just stopped interrupting. Emily looked between us, her face drained of certainty. "What is he talking about?" Mark pointed at me like I was the criminal. "He's manipulating you. He's bitter. He lost money, and now he's trying to drag me down with him." For a moment, I saw the old reflex in her. The instinct to believe him, to look at me with doubt, to choose the louder man. Then Ryan stepped forward. "No," he said. One word. Hard as iron. Mark turned on him. "Stay out of this." Ryan didn't blink. "I was in it the moment you tried to steal from him." Emily gasped softly. Mark's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." Ryan opened the folder. The real one. Not the folder Mark had handed me. Mine. Ours. Copies of transfers. Dates. Account paths. Altered projections. Emails Mark thought were deleted. Documents he had pushed in front of me when he believed I was too tired to read. Ryan laid them on the table one by one. Each page landed quietly. Each page sounded like a verdict. Emily moved toward the table. Her hands trembled as she picked up the first document. Then the second. Then the third. I watched her read. I watched the story rewrite itself in her eyes. Not mine. His. The failed deal. The pressure. The transfer plan. The way Mark had positioned every liability toward me. Then tried to absorb what was left once I appeared broken enough not to resist. It was all there. Not emotion. Evidence. Cold. Patient. Undeniable. "Daniel," she whispered. I hated how small my name sounded in her mouth. Like regret had finally arrived, but had come too late and underdressed. Mark lunged for the papers. Ryan caught his wrist. Not violently, firmly. That was enough. Don't, Ryan said. Mark froze. For 1 second, the room showed its true shape. Mark, cornered. Emily shattered. Ryan standing. And me, finished in everyone's eyes except my own. The consequences didn't need drama. Real consequences rarely do. They arrive through systems, signatures, investigations, locked accounts, lawyers who stop returning friendly calls, partners who suddenly remember they were never that close. By the end of the week, Mark's name was attached to every problem he had tried to bury under mine. By the end of the month, his reputation had collapsed. By the end of the season, his marriage had become a room no one wanted to enter. Emily stayed at the house for a while. Not as my daughter. Not fully. More like someone standing outside a burned building, trying to remember which window had once been hers. She apologized. Many times. Some apologies were quiet. Some were desperate. None of them rebuilt what her silence had destroyed. I thought I was protecting the family, she said one evening. I looked at her for a long time. No, I answered. You were protecting your comfort. She cried then. I did not. Not because I felt nothing. Because I had already spent the tears when she looked down at her plate and let him call me finished. Mark lost the house he wanted to take from me. Then the accounts. Then the friends who had praised his ambition. His smile disappeared first. Then his confidence. Then the clean voice. By the end, he spoke like a man begging the world to misunderstand him. But the world understood enough. That was all it needed. Ryan stayed. That is the part one remember with the most clarity. Not the fall. Not Mark's panic. Not Emily's regret. Ryan. The son I chose. The son who chose me back. He had postponed an opportunity to stay by my side. He had made calls, tracked records, sat awake with me over documents until dawn made the windows gray. He had given up time he could never fully reclaim. So I made sure he did not lose his future too. When the dust settled, I helped him start over. Not with empty praise, with foundation, a small business account, a clean lease, place of his own. Enough capital to begin without begging anyone for permission. He argued at first. I didn't do it for money, he said. I know, I told him. That's why you deserve it. The day I handed him the keys to his new office, he stood there in the doorway and said nothing. For once, silence didn't wound me. Carried weight. Gratitude. Loyalty. Something real. Then he hugged me. Not as repayment. Not as obligation. As family. And I understood then that blood is only a beginning for some people, and an excuse for others. I still live quietly, quieter than before. The estate is smaller now, the circle too, but what remains is clean. No false smiles, no hands in my pockets, no one calling weakness wisdom, no one calling theft strategy. Emily visits sometimes. We speak, carefully. There are bridges you can repair. And there are bridges you can only stand beside, remembering the fire. I don't hate her. Hate is too much labor for a man my age. But trust? Trust is not a door. It is a wall. Once broken, you do not simply walk through it again. As for Mark, I hear things. Never from him. Men like that don't apologize. They explain. They justify. They search for a version of the story where they were clever, misunderstood, unlucky. But I know the truth. He mistook age for weakness. He mistook silence for surrender. He mistook my love for my daughter as permission to rob me blind. And worst of all for him, he mistook Ryan for someone who would stay quiet. Money matters. Anyone who says it doesn't has never watched a family circle your remaining assets like vultures. But money is not strength. Strength is clarity. Strength is knowing who stands beside you when your name no longer opens doors. Strength is letting people reveal themselves fully, even when the truth hurts. Especially then. I lost plenty, but I kept what mattered. My mind, my dignity, my son. And in the end, that was enough to begin again. So tell me, when a family turns away because they think you're finished, Are you wrong to let them discover what loyalty really costs? Or would you have done the same?